Writer's block really sucks. So what do you do when you sit down to write and the words just aren't flowing? Today, I'm going to go over 5 techniques that you can use to overcome writer's block without relying on AI tools. Before anything else, I'm going to start by busting a writing myth for you. You don't need to write your book in order. If there's a scene that you're just so excited to write that every time you lie down and try to go to bed at night, it floods your thoughts, then you should write that scene first. And there's actually a lot of benefits to writing those scenes before anything else. Since you're already excited about writing that scene, it's a lot easier to achieve the flow state. I'm sure you know what the flow state is, but just at a basic level, the flow state is what happens when you're in the zone. Typically, it takes about 7 minutes for the brain to get into the flow state. It's a lot easier to achieve flow when you're excited about something. So those scenes that you're always thinking about and the ones that you're so excited to write about, be sure to get them down on paper because it makes that much easier. And the other great thing about starting with the scenes that you're excited about is that it helps you to map out the rest of your novel. Just like with traveling, if you finished writing plot point A and then jump to writing plot point C, it's a lot easier to figure out what plot point B needs to be because you have those 2 signposts to guide you. This is actually why I find outlines so essential when I'm writing a book, and it's actually what allowed me to write a novel in 30 days back in July last year. I'll be talking about outlines at the end, so be sure you keep watching. Now, the next 2 points that I'm going to talk about have been a game changer for me when it comes to overcoming writer's block. The first one is one that I've been implementing during my editing process, and that's just to set a timer. I find it's a lot easier for me to accomplish editing when I'm going by a timer rather than the traditional word count. So basically, my goal is to spend 30 minutes editing my novel a day. I like to start with a little bit of a pre-writing ritual, which involves making tea, lighting a candle, and putting on my headphones. Sometimes I don't even listen to music. I just put the headphones on, and that helps me get into my flow state and get in the zone. I've also found that when I sit and I actually edit for 30 minutes, I end up meeting my word count goal, which is 1,000 words a day. And having a word count was actually the key to my success when I wrote my novel back in July. I think my goal was to write about 3,300 words a day, and by the end of the month I was actually 25,000 words over my goal, so I made great progress. But on the days that it was hard, having that word count helped me to stick through it. Even though I felt like what I was writing was bad, I reminded myself that it was a first draft. It's not supposed to be perfect. You know, the most important thing to remember is that Rome wasn't built in a day. Just sit down and write. Even if what you put on the page is awful and terrible, you can always get rid of it later. It's not wasted work. You're learning a lot. So remember, everything is a learning experience. If you're enjoying this video, please leave a like and comment what genre you enjoy writing. Thank you so much for watching. Let's continue. When I was in college, my professor gave us a great suggestion for getting into the flow state. And he called it, I don't actually remember what he called it. It's essentially the morning pages, if you've ever heard of that. But what you need to do is you need to just get either some lined paper or a composition notebook, and you're just going to write 3 pages. And it does not matter what you write. If you want to count from 1 to 1,000 or however many numbers fits across 3 pages, then that's what you do. But what's important is that you're sitting there and you're writing by hand for, 10 to 15 minutes in order to really get in the zone. The other thing you can do is use 10-minute writing prompts, and there's a few of these that I really enjoy. Sometimes I like to pick something that's in the room around me. Maybe, you could make a rule, either the first thing you're looking at or, the thing that you like the most in the room. Look around you, just pick something, and then you write from that thing's perspective. So I like to write from the perspective of a plant, and the plant is observing me sitting down and getting ready to write. And it's a great way to warm up with writing without actually having to feel pressure to write anything good. And when you think about it, the choir at a church has to take some time to warm up their instruments or their voices. They'll do scales on their instrument, or they'll practice tongue twisters so that they are ready to actually sing and worship. Another thing that you could do is to summarize or go over your day in as much or as little detail as you want from an external perspective. So you could write about it in third-person omniscient narrator, or maybe you were hanging out with your cat all day, so you could write it from your cat's perspective, which is kind of the same thing as picking something in your environment, but that's besides the point. The main thing here is that you're sitting down and you're actually writing something. If you're interested in more 10-minute writing prompts, let me know so that I can turn them into short-form videos for you. And as I promised earlier, I'm going to talk about outlining. Now, at the beginning of this series, which is my book writing basics series, I have an entire video on outlining. You could find that linked in the corner up there or in the description to this video. So instead of talking about my overall novel outlining process, instead I'm going to talk about a strategy for how you can outline individual chapters. And the method that I'm going to be going over is the staircase method. Before I talk about the staircase method, I really want to emphasize how crucial having an outline was when I wrote my novel. There were certain times throughout the book writing process that I looked at the page and I had no idea what to write. So I said, okay, what's the next thing on my outline? And then I just started from there. But sometimes we don't need the entire outline for our book. We just need to figure out one chapter, and that's the staircase method. Chapters are all about creating dopamine loops. At the beginning of the chapter, you ask a question or present an idea, and the entire chapter is the way that your characters are responding to that initial prompt or query. And then at the end of the chapter, you close the dopamine loop, and then you start a new one by using foreshadowing. Or so let's say I'm reading The Duke and I, which I am, but I haven't actually started reading it because I'm reading The Shining first. But I know sort of roughly the story from the Netflix series. One chapter might cover Daphne's dance with the prince. And the prince is trying to propose to her the whole time, and then Daphne sees Simon and she's like, oh my gosh, I can't be seen like this, because she's of course in love with Simon. The initial query would be her seeing Simon and then trying and failing to go through the dance, and then at the end she goes out and has her confrontation with Simon, and then Simon pulls her aside in the gardens and they start making out, and then they're caught and then they have to duel. So that duel is the promise of the new dopamine loop on the next stair. Don't mind what my hands are doing, just pretend there are stairs here and that we're climbing the stairs. So hopefully that kind of makes sense for what you're trying to do in each chapter, but how does it actually relate to using this method to actually write your chapters? So think about your chapter and what you want your chapter to accomplish, and then start it with a query. And if you haven't done this for your book already, then just pick a random chapter and you can start. Maybe pick one that you're excited about so you could write about it really easily. And then pick your ending query. So those are the first two things that you actually want to pick with the staircase method, because just like we talked about roadblocks earlier and getting from point A to point C, it's easier to figure out the middle once you know your end point and your start point. After that, you can kind of look at your character arc, look at which characters are actually involved in this chapter and their individual goals, and then kind of decide from there how you are going to craft out the dopamine loop. If you're interested in developing great characters, the third video in this book writing basics series is all about how you can develop your characters. It's a great video if you're a beginning novelist, a novelist, if you will. Sorry, I couldn't help it. The staircase method is also great if you don't want to outline your entire novel in one go and instead you want to break it down into chunks. And then you could pick it by either like word count or, a certain number of chapters and just break it down into manageable blocks for your story. Since it allows you to focus on creating dopamine loops, you can look at the different areas that you maybe want to work on building your catharsis, building up to your climax. And then you can block it out by chunks or by word count or by, plot points, whether you want to pick chapters 1 through 3 or the first 3 parts of the hero's journey. You can sort of organize it that way and make it a little bit bigger than just one chapter at a time, but also more manageable than trying to outline the entire novel. So the staircase method is really great if you want a more flexible outlining process. Thank you so much for watching the 4th installment of my Book Writing Basics series. Next week, I'll be putting it all together with a little Pomodoro Write With Me vlog. So we'll have a Pomodoro timer and you can use that session to write, and I'll be using that session to apply everything that we've learned in the last 4 weeks to start outlining and drafting and getting a new book started. So I'm so excited to share that with you. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you learned 2 new things, and I will see you next week. Bye!